Hey, what's up everyone? It's Lauren and today I'm going to be showing you how to digitize this flamingo embroidery design. I'm going to be using my digitizing software, which is Embird, but this tutorial isn't exclusively for Embird users. It's just the basics of digitizing. So whether you're using Hatch or Embrilliance or Brother, PE Design or anything else, the points that I'm going to cover in this video are going to be relevant to you if you're a beginner. This video is going to be more of a stitch along or digitize along. So if you have Embird yourself, you're welcome to screenshot this image and digitize along with me as I'm stitching it out. If you don't have Embird, just make yourself a cup of tea, watch and hopefully enjoy and learn something from this video. I also want to say a big thank you to everybody who's commented or liked or subscribed to my channel so far. It's been so amazing to see and it's really given me a lot of motivation to continue creating these videos. So this is going to be quite a long video again because, as I said, you can digitize along with me. I'm not skipping anything out. This is my process from start to finish on embroidery and how embroidery objects interact with one another within a design. So with all that being said, let's get stuck in. My digitizing software, as I said before, I'm using Embird, and the first thing I want to do is make sure that the hoop size I'm using is appropriate for the design I want to create. So I'm going to click on my hoop, which is up here, and I'm going to change these values to be 10 by 10 is what I want to make, because my design is going to be about 8 to 9 centimeters tall. So by doing this, it makes sure that my design is accurately sized, that the dimensions are 1-to-1, and I can see clearly how my design is going to appear when finally stitched out. So it sort of avoids giving you any sort of false values by having your hoop to be the size you want your design to be. So now that I've clicked apply, if I zoom out, you can see, whoops, a bit too far. The hoop is 100 millimeters by 100 millimeters. Then I'm going to click image at the top here, and I'm going to import my image, which today is a flamingo. Do you want to scale the image to fit your current hoop? Yes, I do. So there she is, our lovely little flamingo. Now, I know everyone's instinct is to just get stuck in with digitizing and start tracing around the outlines of your design. But it's really important to take a step back for a minute and think, how are you going to build this design? How are you going to build it from the ground up? Because planning is important for stability within your design, to ensure there's no gapping and no issues when it comes to stitching it out. So for this particular design, I'm going to start off with the black of its beak and its legs. Then I'm going to do the light pink colours. Then I'm going to do the dark pink, the white of its eye, and then the black of its eye, and finally the black strip of its wing. And I'll explain more why I'm going to do it in this order as we go along. So let's zoom in here on his beak. It helps to get in close so you can actually see what you're doing. Now, I want his beak to be black, so I'm going to select the black colour from my colour palette, and then I'm going to hit fill object or create fill object. Then I'm just going to start tracing around the outline of the design. It's really easy because all digitizing is essentially, it's fancy tracing. So there we are. We have the outline of his beak. Now the next thing you want to do is decide where we want the start and end point to be. So it's going to be quite a logical order. You're going to start at the tip of his beak by right clicking. Oops. Make sure you select the right node. Right clicking and pressing place start point here. And then the stitches will start, the object will start stitching here, and it's going to go down his beak like so to the end point, which I've decided I want to place here. And then I want this particular shape to be an auto column. You can create your own column stitches using these tools by here.
but I find them a little bit fiddly for beginners, so we're going to stick to the very easy auto column where the software does the thinking for you. We were on plain fill before, which is the default setting on fill objects, but we're selecting auto column, and when I hit generate stitches, which is at the top here, if you click onto vectors, you can see the stitches are running across his beak like so. And there we have it. We've created our first object using the fill object tool. So I'm going to zoom out now, and the next place I'm going to take us to are his legs. So we're going to zoom in again on this foot here. I'm going to select the fill object tool, and just by left clicking I'm putting down nodes and just tracing the shape of his foot. That's all it is left click to put down, and then you select the node in the middle and you can drag it around so that it suits the shape well. You can see here that his leg goes underneath this one with the pink detailing on it. I'm just going to digitize through that, and these two objects are going to overlap. A little bit of overlapping in embroidery is okay, but issues start to come with density if you overlap too much, and that is why you cut holes in objects to prevent too much overlapping, because too much density can cause holes in your material, or it can break needles, and it's just generally not good for you to have designs that are too thick or too dense. So my start point is down here on his toe, and I'm going to place the end point up here on his leg, so you can see the flow of stitches are going to go from this end up to that end. And again, I'd like it to be an auto column, so I'm going to hit auto column, hit generate stitches. In embroidery, in order to create designs that are quicker to stitch out, you want to have as few cuts as possible. So in order to do that, you want to have connection stitches running between objects. And we do this by either right clicking and selecting create connection, or just hitting the connection tool, which is up there. And what that does is it creates the connection between the second object and the first object, as you can see in the object palette here. But it makes a direct line. It'll choose like the fastest path from one place to another. And if we left it like that, you just have a running stitch going across your design like so, which we don't want. So the good news is a connection stitch is an editable object, so we can hit our node tool, and just like any other object, we can move it around. And you can add more nodes to it if you want by hitting the add node tool, which is up here. And for this particular object, what we're going to do is we're going to follow the perimeter of the flamingo. Move that up a little bit there. Add another node. And the reason why we're following the perimeter of the flamingo is the black connection stitch is obviously black, which is a dark colour, and the body of the flamingo is pink, which is a lighter colour, and you might find that the black connection stitch will show through the pink of the flamingo's body. So I am planning on putting eventually a really thick satin stitch around the edges of the flamingo's body, and so this black connection stitch should hide quite nicely underneath that. And then I'm just going to take a little shortcut down his leg there, and finally it connects with his toe. We create generate stitches, and the edited connection holds its shape. So we can now move on to doing the next part of this project, which is the flamingo's leg. And I'm going to start again right here, hitting the fill object tool. I'm going to start right down here with his toes, and I'm going to trace the shape of his leg going up to his thigh, back around, down, dragging the node so it's a curve for his knee, and then we're back where we started, but this isn't where I want it to end. I want it to end up here. So again, we have that flow. This time though, I'm not going to hit auto column. I'm going to leave it as a plain fill, but I'm going to change the stitch angle slightly. I'm going to change it to 45 degrees, and you can see usually on the finishing node and the finishing point, the angle of this node changes. That long line there moves as you change the stitch angle. So I'm going to change it to 40 or 45 degrees. And the reason why I'm doing it this way is the next object we have to make is the detailing on the bird's legs. Now, if the black stitches were running horizontally, as they would be if we did an auto column, or if we just left this fill stitch running at 90 degrees like it would have done by default, when I hit my line tool here, these stitches, which are still running horizontally, will sink into the stitches below if they weren't diagonal. So by having the stitch angle at 45 degrees, it lifts up these running stitches which are sitting on top of it, and so prevents them from sinking into the fill below and disappearing. Something you can do to speed up this process is, at the minute you can see these lines curve. If you move it, that point stays anchored where it is. But if you hit this straight line tool up here, you can see that the line snaps to a straight line rather than a curved line. And I'm going to set all of my running stitches henceforth to a straight line by hitting this option here from the drop down menu, so I can continue creating straight lines, and it just speeds up the process a little bit. When I get to his knee, then I can change it back to a curve, and then I can carry on my way doing straight lines, so like so. And then I get to the top, and I just realized that I forgot to create a connection stitch between his black leg and his other black leg. So I'm going to create the connection, and you can see that the line goes right down to his toe, but like I said, we don't want it to be like that. We want this line to be buried, so I'm going to add another node, and I'm just going to hide it like that so nobody can see the line going straight down to his little toe. So I'm going to hit OK, and that line stays like that. Going back then to the pink stitch, next we're going to do his wing. So I'm going to start off, whoops, right, I want to change that back to a curve now because we got a lot of curves happening, and I want to convert this line, which is a straight line, back into a curve. And then I'm going to follow around the object like so. And this time I'm going to put my end point here because next we're going to be moving on to his little pink bill there. But before we get to that point, I want to talk about probably one of the most important features in your digitizing software, and that is pull compensation. We want to put the pull compensation up to about 4 or 5, and the reason for that is when your machine is stitching out an object, let's create a basic shape here to show you my point. Each of these stitches are pulling the fabric together. So even though you might have digitized two objects that are sitting right on each other like that, like there's no visible gap between them in the software, they're completely connected, so you think that when they stitch out that there shouldn't be any gap in your design. When the machine is stitching, it's pulling the fabric together, and that will create a shift in the pattern. So you might find there'll be a little gap in between objects. And what pull compensation does is, if I select these two here and right click, we're back in the parameters palette. If I turn the pull compensation up, it compensates for that shift in the embroidery as the needle hugs the stitches together, hugs the material together, and so it prevents, it's one way at least of preventing gapping in your design. So pull compensation is very important, and it's especially important that you do it for all objects that interact with each other. So this pink wing here will be interacting with the pink, the darker pink eventually, so you'll have to put the pull compensation up on those two. And we're going to connect the wing to his leg. I'm not worrying about this connection stitch or hiding this connection stitch so much as we did with the black one, because pink is a lighter colour than the darker pink, and so it should be better hidden and it shouldn't stand out underneath the darker pink stitches like the black would. Then we're going to do the bird's beak. I'm going to put my start point down here. And for this object, I'm going to overlap a little. And for this object, I'm going to put the end point here, and I'm going to select auto column, and I'm going to put my pull compensation up on that object as well. Hit generate stitches, and I'm going to change the color to the light pink before hitting connect. And then we need to make sure that this connection stitch is also hidden. But as I said, it's not as big a deal for it to be following the outline of the bird. It's not as big of a deal as it was with the black connection stitch. Okay, moving on now to the dark pink parts of the bird. I've selected my dark pink colour, and I'm going to zoom in on the bird's wing. And starting from the top, I'm going to draw my lines like so. And the reason why I'm starting up here and going down to the bottom is all these objects are going to be connected again, because we want as few cuts in the embroidery as possible, and they're also going to be hidden, and the connections are going to be hidden underneath the dark pink body. So we're doing the wing detailing first, and then we're going to cover it with the dark pink of the bird's body. Again, it's just working through the pattern logically, and then when we hit our create connections, you can see that the connecting stitch is exposed, but not for long, because we're going to hide it like so. When you use the line tool, the default is just a single stitch, and I think on this occasion a single stitch is going to be a little bit too thin because these lines look quite chunky here. So I'm going to go to parameters, and here we can edit our lines to be a little bit thicker. You can either use a satin stitch, or you can, in the sample box, you've got a whole load of other detailing and designs here you can use, but on this occasion I'm opting for a sketch stitch, and I'm editing the length of the stitches here to make the lines a little bit chunkier. I'm going to put the width up, and then we'll have, if I click on the 3D version, some chunky lines as opposed to a single stitch. Now we're going to start on the bird's body, and I'm going to put my start point here. And I'm just tracing around the outside of the bird. When you get to parts that are more detailed, it's much easier to zoom in to see what you're doing. And you find that the anchor points you drop, or the nodes you drop, are much more accurate then than if you were zoomed out. Also, the fewer nodes you use, the smoother your lines are. If you ever drop a node that you don't mean to, in Embird you can remove and add nodes by using these keys at the top of the screen. And then I want my dark pink to be touching this border of the light pink exactly. And then once the object is complete, like I was talking about before, we're going to put the pull compensation up so these two objects knit more neatly together. But there's also another thing you can do to also reduce the chance of gaps in your design, and that is to change the stitch angle, like so. So we're going to put that up to 30 degrees, hit generate stitches, and you can see now that these stitches are running at a different angle to those on the lighter pink wing. And what this does is, again, it compensates for any shifting in the material. Now, I want to put a nice chunky satin stitch border around this design because it's going to be turned into a patch, because I like patches. But I could, just by hitting my running stitch tool, trace the outline of the bird myself, but I'm lazy and I'm not going to do that. I've basically got the shape already made here with that fill stitch. So to save time, what I do is I click convert, create outline from fill, and what that does, it creates a running stitch on top of your fill stitch, as you can see here in the objects palette. And then rather than digitize it all by hand again, you can just use that and edit the nodes that are already there to the shape that you desire. And it's just much quicker to do it this way than tracing around the whole object again by itself. If there are too many nodes, you can remove a few, like so. Oops. And then we've got the body of the bird traced, just like that. And I wanted a satin stitch, so I'm putting the pull compensation up on that too. When I hit generate stitches, because your satin stitches are quite thick, you can see they sort of eat into the detailing a little bit here on the beak. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my satin stitch a little thinner. I'm going to put it down to, I think I'll put it down to just 1 millimeter, but I'm going to keep my pull compensation up to compensate for any shifting in the design. And something to watch out for with Embird, as you can see, whenever there's a cut in the design, a little scissors appears. So at this point, you can create a connection stitch, like so. So you see the connection is running between the end point of his wing detailing here to the start point of our fill stitch. But between the outline and the fill stitch, there isn't a connection and there isn't a little scissors. But I know from experience that there is a catch here, and the reason why it doesn't show up is because when you convert a fill to an outline, the start and end points are right on top of each other. And I'm at the wrong part of his body. Where is that? Ha, right, there's the start and end point. If I was to move these, you can see, so when I move these and hit generate stitches, you can see that the scissors appears and I can create a connection between the start and end point. But obviously now there's a gap between our satin stitches, which isn't good. So what I do is I'll put that back to where it's supposed to be. And sometimes the connection stays, which it has in this case, but if it doesn't, I would move my start and end point so they don't directly overlap. And that would mean there's enough space for the machine to actually put down a stitch and create the connection. Okay, now we are going to do the bird's eye, and for this, as we were talking before about density, if I did the white on top of the pink and then the black on top of the pink, let's just do that for a second to show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so if I hit enter, and then if I copy and paste, make it a bit smaller and make it black just to do an eye. If we generate these stitches and click on our density map, whoops, nope, that's 3D, where's density? You can see where is red that is too dense. You don't want to have a lot of red in your design, that's bad. A little bit is okay, but something like that isn't a good thing to see. So we're going to delete these. And the way to avoid issues with density, if you can, is create a hole in the object, like so. And then because you've created that hole, that means there's clear space then for you to, you can convert that hole into a fill, which saves time. And as always, put the pole compensation up. And you'll see then when you hit on your density map that is now green and there's no density issues there. But we are going to put his black eye on top of the white because a little bit of overlapping is okay, but I would say 3 layers is too much. I've chosen to do a column stitch there just because I think satin stitches are better than the standard fill stitches for this thing. If you click on the density map, you can see it is a little bit of red, but it's nowhere near as bad as it was. And then lastly, we are going to do his wingtip. What am I doing? And there's not going to be a connection between these objects because there's no way to connect them. Some cuts are okay, some cuts you just have to accept. So we'll put that on auto column, put the full compensation up a little, and there we have it. There is our completed flamingo. I'm going to save this now, and I've already done one already, as I think I said before. I've done this about 10 times and I kept getting things wrong. So, right, now that we've saved that, we can export this design. And I'm going to save him as a DST file, which is the universal embroidery file that works on all machines. PES works for brother, and TAP is for my Happy Japan machines. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to take this design over to my embroidery machine.